I just want to say thanks to everyone at Chepstow Library for hosting us tonight. I'm delighted to introduce and welcome Renee Knight, author of Disclaimer, and Kate Hammer, author of The Girl in the Red Coat. Before we start, I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed both books. I couldn't put either of them down, so both really, really interesting. I know we've got a mix of people here tonight, some who've read the books and some who have read one or none, so I won't give away any spoilers.
Good.
As much as we can, because if you want a book that's twisty and turny, definitely yours.
Sorry, could you speak up a bit?
Okay, sorry. So just to start off, you've both had incredible success with your first books. I just wondered, you've both been top 10 Sunday Times. Yours has been optioned for a film, and a huge acclaim sort of for both books, reviews and from readers and from the critics. I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about the creative journey in writing the book. I know you did a creative writing course at Aberystwyth.
Yes, I did an MA in creative writing at Aberystwyth University, and I also did a course run by the agency Curtis Brown. It was a 3-month novel writing course. But I think in a way it was a long time coming. I mean, I wrote, as probably most people do. I mean, even as a child I was writing, and it just took lots and lots of twists and turns, and I carried on writing short stories and fragments, and it was really when my children left home, I sort of came to a bit of a crossroads, and that's when I signed up to do the MA. I was wondering, should I retrain, should I do, because I'd worked in documentaries for a long time. And my sister said to me, for goodness sakes, do something that you really want to do for once. So I did.
Okay, and you were a documentary maker as well, weren't you?
Yes, we share that, Kate and I. I did that for years at the BBC, making documentaries, and then I think I started later, having children. So mine hadn't actually left home, but they'd gone to full-time school, and I started writing. So it was about... it's been a long journey, actually. It was about 10 years of being at home at the kitchen table writing, and I started writing scripts to begin with because that felt more aligned to what I had been doing. But I suspect I probably always wanted to write a book and just didn't quite have the confidence to take a plunge in something that took more words than a script.
Because you'd written one book already that's
I
published?
wrote a few scripts, and I got an agent, and I never had anything made, but I got commissions, and then I wrote a few short stories, which I really enjoyed doing. And then I wrote a book, and got another agent for that, and that didn't get published. And then I also did a creative writing course, but I opted for the Faber one. And I had an idea for this book, Disclaimer, just before I started that course, and so wrote half of it during the Faber course, and then it did get published. So it was a long time, but I think probably right, actually. I'm glad that the first book didn't get published. It wasn't good enough.
So on the creative writing course, obviously you're lots of other writers, and do you critique each other's work throughout it?
You do. I mean, it's nice because it's very structured, and also you sort of feel you're given license just for that one evening a week to call yourself a writer. Actually, and the rest of the time I didn't. And you do. During that course you submit 2 lots of 5,000 words, and your sort of peer group critique it. So you are, in a way, in the hands of the tutor to sort of manage that group, because it would be easy to sort of annihilate somebody quite, early on. So it's sort of quite careful, and it's quite a safe place in a way to be testing out your work.
Yeah. So you started doing it on the course. I just wondered how far you both got with the books before you gave it to an agent or the publisher.
Well, I finished it.
Right.
I think I would encourage people to finish things probably before they send them in. I know a few people that have been commissioned on kind of the basis of 3 or 4 chapters, and it actually sounds quite difficult when that happens, because then the wonderful thing about your debut is really there's huge amounts of freedom to it. You're sort of writing, nobody knows what you're doing, nobody cares what you're doing. So I think that's probably quite a difficult way round. So yes, I'd finished the book, and also edited quite heavily myself.
Right.
before I sent it off.
I was going to ask how you found the editing process.
I enjoyed the editing process more, actually. I mean, the difficult bit is the first draft, and I remember my tutor saying it is like pulling teeth, and it is like pulling teeth.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and constantly sort of on your own back, sort of saying, God, this is rubbish, this is rubbish, this is rubbish. And
Is it better
but
just to
actually-
write rubbish and then edit
I think
it
it is,
afterwards?
because actually the joy of the first draft is nobody ever need see it, and so it is a very private thing, actually. And I think I probably got half the book done during the course, but like Kate, I waited and finished it and I probably edited it 3 or 4 times before I let my agent see it. And I think before I let her see it, actually, I'd sent it to a couple of very close friends to read to make sure I hadn't gone completely mad. So yes, and that was something, that was the best advice I got on the course, actually, was to wait and wait and wait, and don't let anybody see what you've done until you're absolutely happy with it yourself. So I think there is a temptation, which I certainly fell into, actually, with the first book, which I was so excited that I finished it. I just showed it to somebody, and actually it was too soon, probably. I should have sat with it for longer and worked harder on it,
Yeah.
actually.
And how have you found the publishing process as a whole in terms of the marketing and the promotion of the book? They both came out in a hardback first, and sort of,
I mean, that was amazing, actually. I mean, people talk a lot these days about sort of self-publishing, and for me, I mean, I don't know whether I would ever have self-published, but actually the machine that sort of gets into motion is amazing. And so personally, I feel very well supported by my publisher, and they've
you've
been...
both got two of the most, the best publishers in the UK, published your books and published them really well. I think.
Yeah, and they've been fantastic, actually, and they have really pushed it and promoted it, and also this sort of sales team, people who go out there, going around the bookshops and selling your book, and I sort of feel that they've worked incredibly hard and been, very supportive, so no complaints on that.
Good. I was going to talk a bit about the sort of there's been quite a lot of domestic noir type books. There's Gone Girl, Girl on the Train. Do you feel you're part of a trend in psychological thrillers that's whetting the public appetite?
Do you know what? I don't know. When I wrote the book, I didn't think about genre at all. I didn't kind of think where it might fit in and whether it was if it was a thriller or a literary fiction or anything like that. I just think I had this story and that's the story I wanted to write. So it's hard to say, really. In a way, I think all the genre is for publishers rather than for writers. I mean, it's quite useful for them as a way of categorising and marketing books, so it's fine, No, so I'm not sure, actually. I'm not sure. I just wrote the story that I wanted to write. Somebody called it a 21st century fairy tale as well. So it's had different labels to it. Not just the thriller kind of label. So
Certainly with the I think it's probably quite hard to market because you go into reading it and it's quite different in many ways to how you think it's going to be, in a really interesting way.
I think it goes in a direction maybe you wouldn't expect it to go in. I think that's the thing. But it is hard to talk about without too many spoilers.
Just one thing. Both books are huge page turners. And that must be quite hard to write, to make the reader want to continually find what's going on. How do you sort of go about trying to achieve that?
I suppose you sort of drive yourself along in a way that you're discovering something as you go along, as you're writing. So, in a way, I found at the moment I'm writing my second book, and that's. I don't want to say it's going to be less of a page turner, but I feel with the first one there was such a clear premise that it just evolved in a way quite naturally, actually. And so once you've established your characters, then you're in a position to say, well, they would do that or they wouldn't do that, and how would they respond in that situation, and So in a way, that's what gets the momentum going, I think, actually. But it takes a while, we were both just saying, to write your way into that, actually. And I suppose it's I remember the tutor as well saying you have to put each scene in the doc. So you test out your scenes, and actually if they don't need to be there, then you take them out, actually, if they're not driving the story forward. Then be ruthless and take them out.
Which must be quite hard to do after you spent...
No,
No?
I don't. Maybe that's from years of television when you'll snip things out. No, I think because it adds clarity, I think.
Yeah.
If you can take something out, you can see things more clearly sometimes when that thing isn't there.
It's a bit like having, I always think it's a bit like having something in your eye. If there's a scene that shouldn't, and then suddenly you take it out and
The contact lens that's dirty,
exactly,
yeah.
you can see clearly. But I think for me, certainly I would say the role of the editor in terms of that kind of forward momentum and compulsion. I had a brilliant editor on this, and I think, I mean, that's part of their role is to get rid of the kind of anything that might be weighing it down, and so, you know, the reader does want to keep turning the pages.
And also I guess there's twists, and they've got to make sense, but you don't want to show the reader what they are too soon.
No, that's right. It is about, you sort of know the story, but it's about what order you put it in and what point you choose to reveal particular things. And again, I think working in television did help with that, just in terms of sort of how you structure something, and at what point you reveal information and when you hold back without actually being misleading. I think that's the thing, is not to deliberately send somebody off in the wrong direction. I think that feels like cheating, actually. It's
And you can read books when there's a twist, or TV program and there's a twist, and you think, well, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and that's really frustrating and annoying. I can't bear that. And you want to be able to feel that actually if somebody went back and reread it, that it would still make sense, and they wouldn't sort of say, spot things.
Yeah, that's the test.
Not that I'd expect anyone to read it twice. But
and the other thing is, there's in a book there's quite a lot of blurred line. I think probably the commonality between both books, between good and evil, right and wrong. I just sort of what your thoughts were on writing that.
I don't really like black and white characters, so I think sort of painting with the shades of grey kind of, I think, just make it more interesting for the reader and as a writer as well. And I mean, I've got somebody in mind who is quite a nasty piece of work. But I read something once which said every villain is the hero in his own story, and I think that's really true, and that's really I've remembered that phrase, and that really informs me when I'm writing sort of bad, evil characters, because obviously they have their own motivations. They're not doing it just because. They're doing it to win at something, or to promote their egos, or to, find love or money or some kind of satisfaction in their own lives, in not necessarily good ways, obviously. So I try and bear that in mind, because I think it's just more interesting to write as well, actually. Because
the character you talk about, you do create sympathy for them.
Yes. Maybe a little bit, but I think it's quite hard once you start looking into a character to be completely unsympathetic with somebody. I think that must be quite hard, I think, as something that you're creating yourself.
Yes, no, I agree. And I suppose also, for me, it's more plausible if there are those shades of grey, that actually, people are complicated, and nobody is quite how they seem on the surface, and everybody has their own motivation, and people struggle through and do the best they can in particular situations. And so, I think it makes it easier for people to relate to and to connect to, and maybe, connect to the person who's supposed to be bad, actually, and think, well, how would I have responded in that situation? Would I have done that?
And how they got there.
And not make them so distant and so bad that actually they're so other that you don't really believe them, actually.
And also you both use different points of view as well. So you've got Catherine and Stephen. So you get the story through both of their points of view. How was that right?
Well, I enjoyed writing Stephen more, actually, in the end, because I think he was so... Well, he was further removed from me, because he was male, and he was much older, and Catherine, round about my age, worked in television.
Was a documentary maker.
Was a documentary maker. Very different sort of documentaries to mine. But I enjoyed writing his character, and I think because I had to dig a bit, work a bit harder, dig a bit harder, actually, to find out who he was. And but no, I mean, I enjoyed actually writing both of them, but he in particular, actually. And once their voices were in my head, it wasn't so difficult to sort of separate them out. And
yeah, I mean, so structurally, did you write lots of his scenes first and then her?
No, I did it I did
right,
it
okay.
as it appears, pretty much. And I did sort of shift around a few chapters, but not much, actually. It sort of was quite clear in a way in my head. And
Yeah, I want to ask you both if you had did you have the story in your head first, or the characters, and how the sort of process of writing the story went?
well, I had the premise in my head of what would it be like if you discovered yourself in a book, and how awful that would be. So in a way, it started about the theme of sort of an invasion of privacy, really, and then that the fear of invasion would involve a secret that you would have to be covering something up. And I had a vague idea of what that secret would be, and then I changed it, actually, as I went along. There was a point about halfway through, and I thought, oh no, it's not that, it's this. So even though I had worked out a plot, a plan and a structure, because I needed somewhere to head to, it was pretty fluid, actually, and I sort of moved it as I went. But it really was the premise. And I suppose the character of Catherine I had, but Stephen came... I didn't know, actually. I sort of thought, who would this person be who might write this book? And in a way, I wanted him to be as far removed from her as possible, so that there's some curiosity about, well, what would the connection be between these two people?
How was your sort of structure of writing the book?
It really started as an image, actually, more than anything. And that was a little girl standing in a forest wearing a bright red coat. And somehow in the image, I sort of knew that she was lost. And it kind of, thought about it a lot for a couple of weeks. It kept sort of reoccurring. And then one night I sat up and wrote the first chapter. And it sort of surprised me because it wasn't from her, but it was from her mum, talking about how missing her and, longing for her and missing her. And everything then just seemed to sort of spring from that, I think. And quite soon, after writing that first chapter, I wrote the last paragraph. So I kind of always knew where I was heading to. And I did the same thing on the book I'm writing at the moment, actually. So I think maybe that's just the way I do it.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's really... I heard somebody else saying that, actually. I think it was J.K. Rowling writes the last few sentences. And
yeah,
that's interesting.
It's sort of... I have had sort of maybe 3 or 4 big story arcs then of how to get there. But and that's about as much as I plotted, really. I know some people do Excel spreadsheets and all this sort of thing. But I'd find that really difficult. I think if I plotted it too finely, I don't know how you feel, I think I would feel like I'd written it in that plotting sort of thing. And when it got to the end of that, I'm not sure whether I'd want to write it anymore. It's nice to be able to surprise yourself, I think, as well as you go along.
It's a balance, isn't it, I think, because you sort of... Well, certainly I feel I need the confidence. I couldn't just plunge in. I'd need to know where I'm heading. But you're right, you don't want to fill it in too much, or you've done it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When I was talking about writing characters quite distant to her, you're doing it through a voice of an 8-year-old child at the beginning of the book. How did you... It was a very impressive thing to write, I thought, because you're reading it, it reads in a very interesting way. It must be quite hard to write an 8-year-old's voice that an adult will read.
She is quite an odd little child, so she's a bit of a strange one. So it's not quite a normal child's voice, I think. But I've always felt that children have quite kind of rich inner lives and imaginations and interior lives themselves, you know. She says herself at one point that adults just think you're like a mouse or a bat and you don't have a thought in your brain and all that sort of thing. And I think that they do. I mean, they have their own opinions. She can be a bit judgy, actually, about adults around. And I didn't want to talk down to her in her voice, so I very much sort of bore that in mind, that, you know, her I think it was more in terms of language that I kept it in terms of an 8-year-old, and I had a really good sweep through it, and I took out any words that I thought that an 8-year-old wouldn't have come across. But no, I enjoyed writing her.
Yeah, no, she's a really interesting character. How do you find writing her mother? Because she's obviously going through a world of pain at the start of the book.
Yeah.
Did you find that hard?
I think I found her harder to write, definitely. And also, I worked with the editor, bringing her forward a bit more. There were a couple of times in the book where she sort of disappeared a little bit too much. She was harder to write partly because she's more stuck in the same situation, and I didn't realise at the time when I started it, but that is actually quite a hard thing to write about when somebody's stuck in a situation, because obviously the forward momentum doesn't happen. But that's one of the great things about writing a debut novel, I think. You're not quite sure what you're biting off.
You're learning as you go.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you could both read a little bit from your books that could introduce us to them.
Yes.
So I don't know who wants. Do you want to go first, Renee?
I'll read from the first chapter, actually, is there. Chapter 1. Catherine, can everyone hear me? All right, sorry. Catherine braces herself, but there is nothing left to come up. She grips the cold enamel and raises her head to look in the mirror. The face that looks back at her is not the one she went to bed with. She has seen this face before and hoped never to see it again. She studies herself in this new harsh light and wets a flannel, wiping her mouth and pressing it against her eyes as if she can extinguish the fear in them. Are you okay? Her husband's voice startles her. She hoped he would stay asleep, leave her alone. Better now, she lies, switching off the light. Then she lies again. Must have been last night's takeaway. She turns to him, a shadow in the dead-hour light. Go back to bed, I'm fine, she whispers. He is more asleep than awake, yet still he reaches out and puts his hand on her shoulder. You sure? I'm sure, she says, but all she is sure about is that she needs to be alone. Robert, honestly, I'll be there in a minute. His fingers linger on her arm for a moment, then he does as she asks. She waits until she is certain he is asleep before returning to their bedroom. She looks at it lying there, face down and still open where she left it, the book she trusted. Its first few chapters had lulled her into complacency, made her feel at ease with just the hint of a mild thrill to come, a little something to keep her reading, but no clue to what was lying in wait. It beckoned her on, lured her into its pages, further and further until she realized she was trapped. Then words ricocheted around her brain and slammed into her chest, one after another. It was as if a queue of people had jumped in front of a train, and she, the helpless driver, was powerless to prevent the fatal collision. It was too late to put the brakes on. There was no going back. Catherine had unwittingly stumbled across herself, tucked into the pages of the book. Any resemblance to persons living or dead. The disclaimer has a neat red line through it, a message she failed to notice when she opened the book. But there is no mistaking the resemblance to her. She is a key character, a main player. Though the names may have been changed, the details are unmistakable, right down to what she was wearing that afternoon. A chunk of her life she has kept hidden. A secret she has told no one, not even her husband and son, two people who think they know her better than anyone else. No living soul can have conjured up what Catherine has just read, yet there it is in printer's ink for anyone to see. She thought she had laid it to rest, that it was finished. but now it has resurfaced in her bedroom, in her head.
Certainly draws you in, doesn't it?
This is chapter 2. Chapter 1, as I said, comes from Beth, who's the mum. And this is Carmel's voice. For people that don't know the story, later on in the book, actually, Carmel goes missing. She disappears. Her mum loses her. But this is before. This is when they're still together, mother and daughter. She's talking about her birthday. For my 8th birthday, I want to go and see a maze. Carmel, what do you know about mazes? Mum says. If I think hard, I can see a folded puzzle in my mind that looks like a brain. I've heard things, I say, and Mum laughs and says okay. We don't have a car, so we go on the bus, just the two of us. The windows are steamed up, so I can't see where we're going. Mum's got on her favourite earrings, which are like bits of glass, except colours sparkle on them when she moves. When we get off the bus, the sky is white, and I'm so excited to see a real maze, I run ahead. We're in this big park, and mist is rolling around in ghost shapes. There's a huge grey house with hundreds of windows that are all looking at us. I can tell Mum's scared of the house, so I growl at it. Sometimes she's scared of everything, Mum. Rivers, roads, cars, planes, what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. But then she laughs and says, I'm such a silly old thing. Now we're at the top of this hill, and I can see the maze below, and it does look like a brain. I think it's really funny I've thought about a brain inside my brain and tried to explain, but I don't do it very well, and I don't think Mum really gets it. But she's nodding and listening anyway, and standing there with her long blue coat all wet from the grass at the bottom. She says, That's very interesting, Carmel, though I'm not sure she really understood. But Mum always tries to. She doesn't just ignore you like you're a mouse or a bat. So we go in. And I know all of a sudden it's a place I love more than anywhere I've ever been. The green walls are so high, the sky's in a slice above me, and it's like being in a puzzle, but in a forest at the same time. Mum says the trees are called yew, and spells it out, because I laugh and ask, yew? I run on ahead down the path in the middle, where the grass is squashed into a brown strip, and Mum's far behind me now. But it doesn't matter, because I know how mazes work, and that even if I lose her, we'll find each other sooner or later.
Thank you both for that. On Carmel being lost in the maze and making herself lost, how important was that to the story, the fact that she then goes missing later on? It's quite interesting.
Yes, I suppose it's sort of almost like a premonition in the story of what is going to happen. And I mean, Beth herself has sort of slight premonitions all the time that she dismisses. So I sort of thought I would put a premonition like that actually within as part of the story.
She's quite an anxious mother.
Yes,
at the start,
she is an
isn't she?
anxious mother, yes, which I relate to very, very much.
Okay, thank you for that. Your book's been optioned for a film. I just wondered what your thoughts were on other books that have been made into films and how well you think they're done.
Interestingly, recently I think there have been some, Room, I don't know whether anyone's seen Room yet or read it. Room is one of my favourite books. I absolutely loved it. And it's a fantastic film, actually. But Emma Donoghue adapted it herself. She wrote the screenplay herself. So I think it can work. I always am slightly nervous about going to see films of books that I love.
It's almost better to go and see a bad book made into a film than a good book sometimes. Yeah,
but it's not. I think it's not always successful, but it can be actually. And I think film is a very different medium. and it should work in its own right. It shouldn't just be an adaptation of the book. But I think in that case it does. Revenant I haven't read. Loved the film, but I don't want to read the book now. I don't know, because I'd read Room first. I mean, I think, there are some successes and there are some which I won't name, but I have not liked, actually.
But you've liked the book?
I've loved books, and a particular book, actually, that was published a few years ago and then made into a film, and I absolutely hated the film.
It's quite heartbreaking when you see a book.
And I thought they then, it was a thriller, and the book held together.
Wasn't Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil?
No. No, it wasn't. But the film the film had sort of plot flaws that were not in the book, and I just, which makes you a bit cross, actually, because they must have created them in the screenwriting, which I said is pretty unforgivable, actually.
Do you want to be involved with your...
Well, I have adapted it, actually, which I think irritated them slightly. I think initially, my agent said, would I want to do it? And I said, well, no, I better get on with the next book. And then I thought, well, no, actually, it'd be mad not to, at least give it a go. And so I have, but we'll see, I mean, it will inevitably be changed, and that's fine. But they're looking for a director at the moment, and I'm sure a director will want to put their stamp on it. So. Yeah.
And sometimes, like the Nick Hornby one, when it's just completely...
Oh, Brooklyn is another one, I think, is a brilliant adaptation. Really brilliant. I have a slight quibble with the end, but tiny. But, yeah.
What about you, Kate?
I wouldn't know where to begin writing a script, actually. I mean, I wrote scripts for documentaries, but that's quite different, I think. So, no, I really, like, even laying it out, something as fundamental as that.
There's a program you can put in that does it all for you.
No, I really wouldn't know where to begin writing a film script. I think it feels a very different thing. I think, yeah.
Would you rather yours would be adapted to a film or a TV series?
Ooh, well, I don't know really. I mean, I would love to see it as a film, but yeah. But no, I definitely wouldn't want to write a script if that came out.
You both said you're working on your next novels. I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about them.
Yes. Wow, it's quite hard. The second novel. I mean, it's different. It will be dark again. It'll be dark territory, and it will be a sort of psychological thriller. But it's different in as much as I've come up with I'm starting with the characters, actually, rather than a premise. And so it's really about sort of loyalty. It's about a particular type of relationship that is a professional relationship, not a family relationship, but very close in a way. And it is about how far you would go to protect somebody else or to cover up from somebody else, but also how far that other person would exploit your loyalty. So it's looking at that. But it is. I'm finding the process quite different because I'm coming from the characters rather than, in a way, disclaimer, because the premise was so clear. I don't know. Maybe I'm just remembering it in a rosy way, but it felt more straightforward to write. Whereas this, I feel I'm just beginning. I mean, I've written enough words for a whole book, and I haven't got to the story yet. So I know I'm sort of writing my way into it at the moment.
So your cutting process is going to be harsh.
Yes. Well, yes, it would be very harsh. But I'm looking forward to that, actually. It's just getting to the end of the first draft. And then
but you know where it's going to go.
I do know where it's going to go, and actually I'm tempted to do what you did, actually. I'm tempted tomorrow when I get back to write the last paragraph, and that might sort of clarify things for me. I'm hoping.